Hey, what's going on? My name is Avi. Thank you so much for joining me today for the next installment of Six Pack Abs Secrets and Myths Uncensored. And we got a juicy one for you today. Today we are tackling the myth that whole foods and processed foods are exactly equivalent in terms of their role in the weight loss or fat loss process. In other words, whether you consume your daily caloric intake exclusively from whole foods or exclusively from processed foods makes no difference, as the myth says. This one's a little bit interesting because it's partially true and also partially not. Let's talk about how it's partially true, which is from the perspective of the first law of thermodynamics, which is that the total energy that you take into your system, if we're treating your body as a system, the total amount of energy that you intake is, as long as that is the same as the amount that the system burns, there will be no weight change. There will be no energy change, right? But if you take in more calories than your system is burning, you will store body fat. If you intake less, then you will lose body fat, right? Generally speaking. Now, of course, let's just say that your daily caloric intake is 2,400 calories, but your daily burn is 2,200. You're going to be storing 200 calories of that as body fat. Now, the question is, after all the stuff that we're about to talk about in the next half of this video, let's just say that even after all that's applied, that 2,400 calories came from processed foods versus whole foods. Would it make any difference? No. And that's where the myth is partially true, actually, that as long as that food, it doesn't matter where that fucking calories came from, where those calories came from. As long as it's 2,400 minus 2,200, it's still going to be that same 200 calories stored as body fat. Now, before going forward, I don't want to put too much time into talking about the difference between whole foods and processed foods because that's a little bit out of scope for this video. But just to give a little bit of a basic idea, right? It's mostly a common sense thing. An apple, for example, is a whole unprocessed food. Applesauce, on the other hand, is a processed food. And the thing that makes processed foods different than whole foods, generally speaking, is they usually have a lot of water taken out. They're dehydrated. They have salt added. They have fiber removed, and they usually have sugar added, right? In other words, all not great stuff for health. And also, I'm going to argue for fat loss. So now, let's talk about why the myth isn't necessarily true. We just talked about how it is true that if I eat 2,400 calories of Twinkies versus 2,400 calories of a balanced whole foods diet, well, as long as the net amount intaken is 2,400 calories, and I'm still burning that same 2,200 calories, well, guess what? I'm still going to store 200 calories as fat. It doesn't matter if I ate the Twinkies versus the whole foods. But here's where things get a little bit weird. We got to talk about protein, fiber, and omega-3s in this equation and why they matter. Why does protein matter, right? If I'm eating a lot of whole foods with a lot of protein, let's say that I'm eating 180 grams of protein versus if I was doing processed foods, maybe I'm only getting 60 grams of protein. Why does that make a difference? Well, there's this thing called the thermogenic effect of food, or TEF for short. Now with TEF, protein has by far, out of the three macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fat, protein has by far the highest thermogenic effect of food. Meaning that, let's say that you've got 25 grams of protein. There's roughly 4 calories per gram of protein. So 25 grams of protein is going to be 100 calories. However, the TEF of protein, sorry, I should clarify what that even means. Thermogenic effect of food means the amount of calories your body burns just processing and assimilating that nutrient. So in other words, there's going to be a certain amount of body heat generated just by your body doing the work to break down that nutrient and to metabolize it so that it can then be used for usable energy throughout the rest of your daily processes. So protein has the highest TEF by far out of the three macronutrients. So if you have 100 calories of protein, roughly 30 calories or 30% will be burned just by your body actually doing all the work necessary to unfold the protein and assimilate the protein and then use the protein for organ repair or muscle repair or whatever it's going to use it for. Whereas for fat, the thermogenic effect of food is like 1 or 2 calories, I want to say. These aren't hard numbers. You can go and fact check me, but I'm just giving the general idea. And then for carbs, the thermogenic effect of food is like somewhere around 5 or 10 calories out of that 100, so 5 to 10%. So protein, if you have a higher protein diet, that is going to dramatically influence the calories in part of the equation, right? just to take this to like a, you know, kind of extreme, but also kind of not. If you're doing 2,400 calories, let's say that 200 grams, you're eating 200 grams of protein in that, right? So in other words, 800 calories of that 2,400 came from protein. Well, 30% of 800, let's do the math. That's 240 calories. So now instead of 2,400 calories intaken, that actually really is 2,160 calories. That is a big difference. So that needs to be accounted for, and you're not going to have nearly as much protein from a processed food diet, generally speaking, or a diet that has a lot of processed foods. So protein disturbs the equation significantly. What about fiber? Okay, so fiber, what fiber is, so you might have heard the terms like prebiotic, postbiotic, probiotic. Probiotic are actually the bacteria in your gut microbiome. Postbiotic are the waste product that the bacteria produce when they eat prebiotic, which is fiber. Now, fiber is really interesting because it actually, when you're having a healthy amount of fiber in your diet, what will naturally happen is that fiber, in conjunction with the bacteria that are consuming the fiber, there will actually be a lattice work formed on the interlining of your gut that then prevents, at least to a slight degree, the amount of nutrients that actually get absorbed from the food you just ate. In other words, to put this simply, when you consume fiber, your body will actually absorb slightly less of the calories that you consumed because of this lattice work on the inside of the gut, right? Because the gut is the barrier between, right, what you took in and then the bloodstream. Those nutrients go through the gut and then into the bloodstream. So this lattice work that's formed from eating a healthy amount of fiber actually reduces the amount of nutrients that are like absorbed, and then because of that you poop out more. Hence why when you eat more fiber, you generally just tend to not be constipated. You're pooping more, you're pooping in a healthful manner. So you're actually literally pooping out a slightly higher portion of calories, which means now, going back to our 2,400 calories example per day, it might not be 2,400 calories absorbed. If you're consuming a good amount of fiber, let's say upwards of 60 grams of fiber in that day, it might be 2,300 calories, 22. This one is not nearly as easy to measure as the protein. Like, we know concretely the TEF of protein is about 30%. That one's easier to measure. That said, the effect of having more fiber in the diet is potent for weight loss. And this isn't just because of what we just mentioned, talking about how you're actually going to absorb less total calories from the food, but it's also relevant because fiber is critical for feeling satiated and satisfied from your meal, both psychologically and physiologically, right? Fiber slows gastric emptying. That's how these drugs work, like Ozempic and Mounjaro, right? Slowing gastric emptying gives you a perception of fullness mechanically in your stomach. The piezoreceptors are going to actually, the piezoreceptors in your gut, which are the things that detect mechanical pressure in your gut, are going to continue to send signals of fullness for a longer period of time when you're consuming fiber. Not to mention that foods high in fiber tend to be high in volume, so you get to eat more, which psychologically is going to be helpful for satiation. And then, of course, we can't forget to talk about omega-3s, right? If you're eating foods high in omega-3s, omega-3s are literally so important for the brain. The brain actually, the body and the brain do not use omega-3s for energy, unlike other fat, right? When you consume other dietary fat, those are broken down as per normal and used for energy and daily needs. However, omega-3 is so important for the structure of the brain that the body and brain exclusively reserve the consumption of omega-3s for brain maintenance, if you will, brain repair, cognition development, and cognition support. So when you're consuming calories from omega-3, that doesn't even factor into the calories in the equation. This is why eating foods like salmon is really deceptive, because it'll say it has a certain number of calories, but how much of that is from omega-3? It's a non-negligible amount, right? And your body's not going to burn that. It's not going to store, it's not going to store that. It's not even factoring into the calories intake in part of the equation. So, getting back to the original myth, are whole foods and processed foods the same? Hell fucking no. They're not. If the net, after all that stuff we just talked about, if the net amount of calories is the same from both, then yes, the myth is true. But if we just have 2,400 calories of Twinkies versus 2,400 calories of a diet that's high in protein, high in fiber, and high in omega-3s, that Twinkie diet is going to be pretty damn close to 2,400 calories taken in and actually 2,400 calories absorbed. Whereas if we're eating a high protein, high fiber diet with omega-3s, that 2,400 calories is not going to be 2,400 calories absorbed. It's going to be closer to like 2,000 or even 1,900 calories absorbed, depending on the exact composition of those foods. So this is an interesting one, and I'm not here to say never eat processed foods. Obviously, I love my Ben & Jerry's. You got to do your thing, enjoy your foods. All I'm saying is be aware of this. Having a higher balance of whole foods in your diet will absolutely make weight loss easier and more accessible for you. Don't let these if it fits your macros bodybuilders and all these people on the web telling you like, oh yeah, you can just eat all processed foods and lose weight. Technically, yes, that's true, but you're not here to just lose weight. One, you're here to be healthy, and also, why not make the process easier on yourself? It's going to be way easier if you're feeling satiated, if you're feeling healthy, if you're feeling the good energy that eating whole foods gives you, right? So why would you want to just eat all processed foods? You're not going to feel very satiated, and also it's actually going to make weight loss more difficult because you're going to be absorbing more total percentage of your calories consumed than you otherwise would if you were just intaking whole foods. So yeah, pretty clear one on this one. Even though it is complex, definitely try to eat more whole foods than not, and enjoy processed foods whenever you want, but just know what you're getting into. It's like, yeah, enjoy yourself, but just be knowledgeable, be informed, right? Don't do things uninformed. Know what you're getting into. Like when I'm eating a pint of Ben & Jerry's, I'm fully clear with myself about what I'm doing and that this is not a helpful food for my weight loss journey, but I fucking love it, and it is nice to have the occasional treat. And also, it is part of pretty much every single binge for me. And binging is definitely a part of my life, which, yeah, I love it. Balances out with my other goals, and I don't really fucking give a fuck. I'm going to enjoy it, but just know what you're getting into. That's it for today. Sun's already set. Look at this beautiful backdrop, though. SF Bay Area, we got the nice little sunset over there. It's been a rainy day, but I'm going to go home, get some food. Speaking of whole foods, what I got in the docket today? I got salmon, air-fried beets, and lentils that are meal prepped in the Instapot. One of my favorite meals overall. But yeah, that's it. If you like the video, please feel free to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. We got tons of more content coming out in the future, as always. If you got any ideas for the six-pack abs secrets and myths uncensored video, please feel free to drop it in the comments. And I think that's it for today. I wish you a wonderful day. It's Sunday evening. Work tomorrow. That fucking sucks after a long ass vacation too, but you know, it is what it is. I hope you have a great Monday morning, as productive and restorative as it possibly can be. Thank you and good night.